Hello students, today we will be discussing the topic Autonomy and Secessionism in India through two case studies, Nagaland and Punjab. The objective behind today's discussion is to give you an understanding and insight about the nature of autonomy and secessionist movements in India, to understand the nature of two movements, the movement for an independent Nagaland and the Khalistan movement in Punjab. And finally, to understand the approach of the government in order to accommodate these two movements. Now students, before we move on to these two movements, it is important to understand what is secessionism and why do secessionist and autonomy movements occur in countries. Multicultural states usually witness the rise of identity movements wherein different cultural identities demand recognition, and in the absence of such a recognition, they may resort to different movements for identity assertion. Now, the major demands of these groups and movements range from autonomy to constitutional safeguard, separatism and secessionism. What is secessionism? Secessionism is the act of withdrawing formally from membership of a federation or body, especially of a political country. Technically speaking, secessionism refers to the breaking away of a regional unit from a federation. When a part of the unitary state breaks away, it is considered separatism or partitioning. And history is replete with examples of such partitioning and secessionism. For instance, if you remember students, Ireland separated from England, India was partitioned to create Pakistan. The breakaway unit may want or may actually decide to join another political entity or may seek complete political independence. East Pakistan seceded from Pakistan to become sovereign state of Bangladesh. Thus, both separatism and secessionism lead to the splitting up of a political entity. Now, what are the reasons behind the emergence of secessionist movements? Secessionism or separatism arises in any political system when cultural minorities develop deep, unbridgeable frustrations and fail at seeking peaceful resolution of their grievances. Secondly, most minority frustrations emanate out of economic injustice or social inequalities or cultural deprivations or police brutalities or political repression. There are other subsequent factors also like poverty, unemployment, economic exploitation, which can trigger a secessionist movement. Now, what is the basic nature of secessionist movements? Usually, secessionist movements can take several undesirable forms like violent demonstration, strikes, use of terror tactics like bombing, dynamiting, kidnapping, injuries or deaths and assassinations. Governments usually respond through violent repression and ironically always disproportionately with overwhelming margin of superior force, pursuing the policy of nipping at the bud. This exhibition of superior force of government becomes the very cause of escalating the protest movements, leading in certain cases to guerrilla or civil war. A solution could be partitioning or breakup of the country depending upon the size, the regionality and commitment of the minority community to that particular cause. In the post-independent period, demands for ethno-linguistic divisions of the country arose. Unrest started in South India where secessionism was threatened. Similar secessionism rose in Northeast India, Punjab and Jammu and Kashmir. Let us study two important and significant secessionist and autonomy movements in India, Nagaland and the movement for a separate Khalistan in Punjab. Let us start with the Naga movement. The Nagas, an Indo-Mongoloid group comprising of approximately 17 hill tribes, mainly inhabiting the state of Nagaland and adjoining areas, were perhaps the first subnational group in India and in South Asia to launch a serious secessionist movement just after independence. What was the basic reason for them? A distinct tribal economic pattern, local traditions of self-governing institutions, a deep sense of attachment to the native soil, a desperate urge to protect the traditional laws, culture, customs, and tribal authority are a few factors that gave rise to the secessionist movements. In fact, they wanted to control the Naga way of life. Prior to the advent of the Naga National Council, most of the tribes lived an isolated life and they were basically concentrated at village level governance. The Naga National Council, which was a representative body of the Nagas, utilized all the methods at their disposal such as custom, tradition, village level governing institutions, religion, and a definite sense of territoriality in order to ignite the idea of a separate Nagaland. According to notable scholar writing on Northeast India, Udayan Mishra, initially the NNC was talking more along the lines of full regional autonomy. However, the Naga leaders soon realized that if they did not ask for independence, their case would be marginalized. In its pursuance of the demand of an independent state, a delegation led by Zapu Fizo met Lord Mountbatten, the last British viceroy in colonial India, with the suggestion that India, after partition, should act as the guardian of power for a period of 10 years, which the Nagas would be free to determine their political future. The first step towards understanding the Naga demands and trying to resolving them was the Akbar-Haidari Accord and the Nagas. Now, Akbar Haidari was the governor of Assam in the period immediately after independence. An agreement was signed which was called the 9-point agreement between Akbar Haidari and the Naga leadership over a number of issues ranging from tribal laws to ownership of the Nagas on land and taxation. However, problem emerged with Article 9 of the agreement, which the Nagas argued had given them the right to complete independence once the interim government's term was over. This was not at all acceptable to the government of India, which argued that the said article gave the Naga National Council the right to suggest certain administrative changes, but definitely not secessionism. The Naga leaders rejected the 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution, which disregarded their earlier agreement and made provisions for autonomous hill councils for the hill tribes within the state of Assam. The next few years witnessed slogans such as Nagaland for the Nagas. A plebiscite was conducted in the year 1951 on 16 May to understand what the Naga people wanted. About 99% of the Nagas endorsed the demand of independence. Throughout the next few years, the Nagas stayed non-cooperation against the government so as to pressurize the Indian government to accept their demand. In 1956, the Naga National Council announced the formation of a federal government of Nagaland, its own standing army, signaling the first powerful insurgency in post-colonial India. During this period, there occurred internal conflicts within the Nagas themselves. The Naga People's Convention, which was another representative organization of the Nagas, was formed in 1957, and they started the demand for a separate province of Nagaland. In 1960, Prime Minister Nehru announced the plan for formation of a separate state of Nagaland. Despite different measures to curb Naga insurgency, the Nagas stuck to their demand of an independent state of Nagaland, which would be sovereign. It was left now to the Baptist Council of Nagaland to take initiative in 1964 in order to find out a peaceful resolution of the issue. However, the peace process was disturbed and retarded owing to the commission that was created and their failure to submit a proper resolution. The next important landmark in the resolution of the Naga issue was the Shillong Accord of 1975. In order to pacify the Nagas, the Shillong Accord was signed in 1975, by virtue of which the Nagas ratified the formation of the state of Nagaland, undertook to surrender their arms and agreed to enter into a dialogue with the Indian government for a political resolution of the Naga issue. The Naga federal government refused to ratify the accord and formed Naga Socialist Council of Nagaland, or Naga Nationalist Socialist Council, to fight the cause of an independent Nagaland. Now, in the last 75 years, the Naga issue has centered around two demands: the establishment of Greater Nagaland, and secondly, an independent Nagaland, or the issue of self-determination of the Nagas. Now, how have the Indian state responded to the Naga demand of a separate sovereign state? Although the demand for a separate sovereign Nagaland still continues even after the grant of statehood, it is worth mentioning that the Indian state has played an accommodative role in fulfilling the Naga demands. The Government of India has accepted the demand of the Naga People's Convention through an amendment of Article 371A of the Constitution. And what does it provide? No act of parliament affecting social or religious practices of the Nagas or their customary laws and procedures or administration of civil and criminal justice shall be made without the consent of the Nagas. In other words, the Constitution safeguards protection of Naga way of life and their customs and rights. Subsequently, clause 2 of the same article provides for further autonomy of the district of Tuensang and now the district of Mon in the autonomous state of Nagaland. Now, these two important provisions actually reflect that the Indian state has been accommodative to the Nagas, but definitely have not supported the demand for secessionism. The Nagas still today are firm in their stance of self-determination and assert that since the Nagas were never a part of India, the Naga struggle for self-determination never be regarded as secessionist or separatist, and they have put the blame on the British, who have arbitrarily fragmented the Naga people. Fresh attempts to resolve the Naga issue started in mid-1990s when the then Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao tried to meet important Naga leaders on 15 June 1995. The next stage was a declaration of the subsequent ceasefire with the Naga Socialist Council of Nagaland, with the ISAC and the MOVIA. It came into force in 1997. However, such peace initiatives by the Indian government were seen as mere attempts towards achieving a temporary lull in violent activities by the insurgents, but this was not a long-term solution. This is mainly because the government could not come out with inclusive peace processes involving all the stakeholders in the region. The central issue during the talks between the Government of India and the NSCN-IM has been sovereignty of the Nagas. The Government of India maintains that there is enough scope to ensure a complete autonomous existence for the Naga people within the ambit of the Constitution of India. So, why a demand for a separate sovereign state? On the other hand, the NSCN-IM has been expressing reservations about this approach and suggesting changes in the Constitution to ensure full autonomy to the Nagas. In 2015, after Narendra Modi came to power, a framework agreement was signed. Now, this framework agreement focuses on certain important areas. First, it recognized that Naga history and situation was definitely unique, implying that the solution to the Naga issue should also have to be unique. It therefore cannot be based on or be similar to the centre's relationship with other existing states of the Union. Secondly, the framework provided and proposed that sovereign powers would be shared between the centre and the Nagas through a division of competencies, through renegotiating the Union state and the concurrent list of competencies of the Indian Constitution in view of the Naga demands, but nothing clearly has been mentioned. Third, the two sides would strive for a mutually acceptable, peaceful settlement of the issue, recognizing the complexities and differences. This meant that just as the government of India was trying to understand the issue of the Nagas should also try to appreciate the complexities of the problem and the political difficulties that the government was trying to do, and how the government was trying to fulfill the aspirations of the Nagas within the constitutional ambit. It was within this framework that the two sides have agreed to sign this agreement, but the details of the permanent peace process has not been made public till date. However, students, please note that despite numerous efforts and initiatives aimed at resolving the Naga issue, there remains considerable challenges that need to be taken into account while carving out an acceptable and comprehensive solution to the Naga issue. Now, this was about Nagaland and Northeast India. Let's come to another part of the country, Punjab, and the Khalistan movement. The rise of a powerful secessionist movement in Punjab during the decade of the 1980s was an unprecedented development in post-independence India. Never before had the independent state experienced such a serious crisis of political legitimacy as it encountered while dealing with the Sikh militants. Though a border state, Punjab was well integrated with India. There had never been any doubt about the nationalist sentiments of the Sikhs. But what happened? What led to this demand for Khalistan? Let us try to understand the genesis of this conflict. The socio-economic changes and political developments that have been occurring are seen as precipitating a militant movement in Punjab. Now, what are those factors? The impact of the Green Revolution, the lack of non-agricultural employment, limited options to enter military service, the social changes related to modernity that undermine a separate Sikh identity, and the political machinations by the central government are considered to be important reasons behind the rise of the Khalistan movement in Punjab in the mid-1980s. Discontented with the economic and social and political conditions, the Sikhs in the late 1970s started militant movements. The capital city of Chandigarh was not transferred to Punjab, and certain Punjabi-speaking areas were left out from the state of Punjab. This was not liked by the Sikhs. Other issues also created a sense of injustice, which amounted to the control still wielded by the central government over agricultural policies, licenses for industry, control over the dispensation of water rights to industry, control over the dispensation of water rights to neighboring states, and smaller issues such as the license to set up a broadcasting from the Golden Temple, Amritsar. Paul Brass, noted political scientist, argues that while socio-economic issues are important during times of normal politics, the crisis should be located in the politicization of a conflict over the cultural and religious separatedness of the Sikh community and prolonged by the lack of a settlement for specific grievances. Let us quickly go through the main phases of the Khalistan movement. By 1981, tensions started escalating between the Hindus and the Sikhs, and this was because of a number of reasons. The first reason was the Sikh Educational Conference on 15th March 1981. This conference was attended by several high-profile Sikh leaders. Though there was no formal resolution passed for the creation of a separate Khalistan, but when Ganga Singh Dhillon put forward the idea of a separate sovereign Khalistan, members attending the conference supported with the slogan Khalistan Zindabad. Second, the assassination by Sikh militants of a veteran newspaper editor Lala Jagat Narayan, who was an outspoken critic of the Khalistan movement, also furthered the Khalistani movement. Third, the concerns by the Khalistan militant group, that was Dal Khalsa, and their hijacking of the Indian Airlines Boeing 737 plane on 29 September 1981 was an important phase in the movement. The fourth and arguably the most significant reason relates to the Congress-I's unwillingness to implement the main theme of the Shiromani Akali Dal's infamous Anandapur Sahib resolution. Let us go through what is this resolution. The main demands of the Anandapur Sahib resolution was an adjustment of powers between the centre and state, whereby the former's jurisdiction would be restricted to foreign policy, defence, communications, currency, etc. All states of federal India will be equally weighted. For the Union Territory of Chandigarh and the Punjabi speaking areas deliberately left out of the post 1966 Suba would be transferred to Punjab. But nothing was actualized, and this led to violent demonstration in Punjab with Rail Roko, Rasta Roko and Kam Roko agitations. It was followed by the Indian state retaliating by impositioning President's rule in Punjab. The centre resorted to further drastic measures, sealing of Punjab with rest of India through the construction of an armed perimeter along its border, ordering a virtual media blackout within the state. During the next few days, Indian armed forces raided over 40 Gurudwaras across Punjab suspected of harbouring terrorists and were used as storehouses for arms and ammunitions. Of the many Gurudwaras raided, it included the Sanctum Sanctorum of the Sikhs, the Golden Temple, in what was codenamed Operation Blue Star, June 1984, which was a turning point in the Khalistan movement. What happened after Operation Blue Star? The action drew widespread critique from the Sikh community. Many of them ceased to consider themselves Indian any longer. Immediately after Operation Blue Star, the Indian Army conducted through Operation Woodrose what was essentially a tidying up exercise to catch absconding militants thought to be hiding out in rural Punjab. Many scholars agreed that innocent young Sikhs were brutally terrorized during the operations, prompting many to flee across the border to Pakistan, only to return back a little later as trained, ideologically indoctrinated Khalistan militants. The assassination of Indira Gandhi by her two Sikh bodyguards escalated the crisis even further. What happened subsequently were anti-Sikh massacres in the early week of November immediately following Indira Gandhi's assassination. The exterminations or anti-Sikh massacres resulted in 2,217 deaths, of whom majority of them were from New Delhi, and prompted them to draw parallels of violence during the partition period. Rajiv Gandhi, when he came to power, tried to normalize the crisis. He ordered the release of the Akali leaders who had been imprisoned since Operation Blue Star, including Sant Longowal. As a result, Rajiv Gandhi and Sant Longowal were able to thrash out an accord in order to ensure that the terms of the Anandapur Sahib resolution could be formulated and implemented. But the accord failed to be implemented largely because the other Akali factions did not back this particular accord. And the major obstacle came from Prakash Singh Badal, one of the foremost Akali politicians in Punjab during the agitation, branding this accord, the Rajiv Gandhi Longowal Accord, as a sellout. In fact, some have since indicated that it failed to materialize. This accord failed to materialize because Congress-I felt that it would electorally suffer elsewhere in India, particularly in the Hindi heartland, on the ground that the accord was seen as a politics of minority or Sikh appeasement. Subsequently came in the declaration of Khalistan, which was supported by the Panthic Committee. The declaration was not taken sweetly by the Indian government. It was followed by Operation Black Thunder 1. What happened here? Troops from the NSG and Border Security Force stormed the Golden Temple to rid of all the militants hiding there. Though the temple initially escaped major damage on this occasion, the raid turned out to be a strategic disaster because only a small time few militants could be captured, but no one of notable significance could be caught. Another attack and raid was planned, that was Operation Black Thunder II, which was in 1987 to mop up Sikh militants and nip the Khalistan movement in the bud. Now, how did the movement end? It was a probable combination of visible moral bankruptcy of many of the secessionist militants who lost that urge, intra-militant rivalry, right-minded Punjabis turning their backs on the violence, and brutal state terrorism, which ultimately contributed to the demise of the Khalistan movement. One thing is certain from the study of these two movements, students, that India has witnessed secessionist movements, not to speak about the various autonomy and regional movements that have been happening in the country since independence. But another important thing to be noted is the center has tackled these movements through a variety of measures, sometimes through repression and strict tackling of militancy, and sometimes through talks and peace accords, and have averted the disintegration of the Indian Union. It should be remembered, students, that worldwide in 1990s, federations had collapsed, and we know that the collapse of the Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, to name a few. But India has successfully averted disintegration of the Union through careful accommodation of demands within the constitutional framework. The state has never bowed down to secessionist forces, but has kept open avenues for dialogue with the ethnic groups so as to contain and accommodate ethnic conflicts and prevent spillover of conflicts. Thank you.